Okay. Boker Tov. Boker. First, today is called Isru Chag. Isru Chag means the day after the biblical holiday. Usually every day, not every day, but every holiday, meaning the three pilgrimage holidays, which is the Shavuot holiday, the Sukkot, and Passover. The day following that is called Isru Chag, where many of the sacrifices in the day of the temple were bought for those who were still in Jerusalem and so on. With more details to that, but that's not the focus of today's class. Today's topic is, can you change, should you, and the counting of the Omer. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction, and I'm reading over here to there's a wonderful guide. There's a wonderful guide by Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who discusses this mitzvah of Omer very beautifully. Let me close this in the background because I think it's affecting the lighting here. Okay, I think that's better. So the counting of the Omer is a biblical command that from the second night of Passover until the holiday of Shavuot, which is when we celebrate the giving of the Torah, you should every single day count a day. You count the day, the counting of the Omer. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this mitzvah. Some of you, it might be new to you. And every day, on the first day, we say, Yom Echad LaOmer. Today is the first day of the counting of the Omer. What was the Omer? Just to give you some brief background or brief details to the mitzvah, which is the counting of the Omer. Omer literally means the korban Omer was a sacrifice that was bought, an offering actually, that was bought from barley, from the first crop of the year, and that was brought on the first day of Passover. That was brought to the, let me put this on Do Not Disturb. That was brought to the temple, to the Bet HaMikdash, and that was called the Korban HaOmer. And the Svirat HaOmer, the Torah in the Torah tells us that on the next day you have to begin the counting of the Omer. Now, I do want to say that nobody reminded me that I didn't make a blessing on my coffee yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Shehakol Niyeh Bidvaro. Okay, I hope you're sitting with your own cup of coffee or you're answering amen for that blessing. So that's the counting of the Omer. The counting of the Omer is the and the good morning to all those who have given us a thumbs up or said good morning. So good morning back to all of you, and let's continue with the learning. Thank you for joining us on the learning on this wonderful day, the day after Pesach. Now, so the counting of the Omer is something that we do for 49 days, and 49 days is there's a reason for the 49 days, as we will discuss. And the reason why there's another reason why I want to share this is because I recently read a story, a beautiful story that I want to share with you today, that I also read. I actually saw the person that there was an interview done by Gem where this person in firsthand relates the story. So it's always nice when you could share a story that you heard and saw from the person firsthand. So we will do that as well, and it related to our subject about changing, about it, which is part of the objective of the counting of the Omer. Let me explain. So, the mitzvah of the counting of the Omer, as I said, is count 49 days. Why 49 days? Because Kabbalistically, we are divided. Our character, our personality, as it mirrors the more spiritual, our spiritual origins, which is known as the Esses Sfirot. This is a little Kabbalah, the 10 Sfirot. Our characteristic, or our character, our personality, as defined by Kabbalah. Psychology might describe it in one way. Kabbalah describes it as the 7 Sfirot, or the 7 Midot, 7 attributes. And let me read the actual 7 Sfirot. I thought I put this on Do Not Disturb, but I guess let me put this on Do Not Disturb. Sorry for that. And so the 7 attributes is Chesed, which means loving kindness. There is Gevorah, which means justice and discipline. That's number 2. There is Tiferet, which is harmony and compassion. There is number 4 is Netzach, which is endurance. And then there's Hod, which is humility. There is Yesod, which is bonding. And there is Malchut, which is sovereignty. And according to Kabbalah or Hasidus, these 7 attributes basically comprise all the different elements of our personality in terms of our emotional makeup. There is the Chabad, which is the Chachma Bin Adat, which is more a description of our intellect, but this is what describes our emotional makeup. Now, each one of these are comprised of the other 7. Now, what happens when you take 7 times 7? Not that complicated. You add the total of that is 49. There's a known Jewish classic joke about a fellow who was what we might call a shlemazel in town. He was known to be a shlemazel, and was not necessarily the most financially successful individual in town. And one day he shows up with a beautiful suit, and he looks like $1 million. And they ask him, "What's going on? You know, where is this coming from?" And he says, "Baruch Hashem, thank God, I did very well." He says, "The way I did very, very well is because I used my brains 95%, and 5% is mazel. But 95% was my brains." They asked him, "What does that mean?" He says, "I won the lottery. And hence I'm doing well now. I'm a macher. I'm doing well." So they asked him, "So please explain the 95%, 5%. He says, "Well, I won the lottery because of my 95% wisdom." He says, "What's your 95% wisdom that caused you to win the lottery?" He says, "I know the number 7 is a very, very important number, because 7 is the 7th day is Shabbat. And I figured if 7 is important, then 7 times 7 is even more important. So I picked number 46. So they asked him, they said, 7 times 7 is not 46. 7 times 7 is 49. He says, that's where the mazel comes in. So it was 95% seichel, brains, and 5% mazel. So this is an old Jewish classic joke. Now, as we have our discussion here today, I mentioned all the 7 emotional characteristics, but within those 7 emotional characteristics, they all are comprised of all the other 7. So if you have chesed, which we said chesed is loving kindness. So loving kindness, within it has all the other 7. There is what we call chesed sheba chesed, kindness within kindness. There is justice and discipline within kindness. And I again want to stress, there's a little guide put together, and you can get this on the website at coralsprings.chabad.org. Just type in the counting of the Omer, and I'm sure you'll be able to get to it. But there's a guide that very beautifully breaks this all apart into 49 steps. And this is the point about, can we change? The 49 days of the Omer was when we prepared from the Exodus to the receiving of the Torah. And in order to receive the Torah, which is the greatest gift that God has given to humanity, giving us the Torah, giving us the Bible, we had to refine ourselves to the best of our ability. And the way we did so is such a wonderful example and directive of how one person should approach the idea of how to improve, how to change your own personality, change for the better, work on your flaws. And the Torah so beautifully breaks it down into 49 sort of baby steps. So I want to take maybe 2 examples today of showing how the Omer and helps us refine one part of our personality every single day. So let's start, and I'm going to actually read here from this guide by Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Okay? So I'm going to read, and you could do so on your own. I encourage you to do so. Again, I want to stress this again with the understanding that in order to change, to improve, can you change? Yes, absolutely. Is it difficult? Yes. Does the Torah expect, and therefore, does that mean that God gives us the strength to change? Yes, again. But we need to be fully committed, and you got to do so, not, okay, I'm just going to change and that's it, but you got to break it down and become, and really focus in to do so one step at a time. As I will read over here, you'll understand a little bit more what I'm talking about. So here, week 1, we are now in week 2. We just entered into week 2 last night. But week 1 is chesed. Why is chesed the first one? So let me read for you over here. Love, chesed and love, kindness, love are interconnected. Love is the single most powerful and necessary component in life. Do you agree with that? You are welcome to disagree and tell me why. You are welcome to agree and tell me why as well. Love is the origin and foundation of all human interactions. It is both giving and receiving. In other words, receiving is also can be an expression of love. It allows us to reach above and beyond ourselves. So that's his definition of love over here, is the ability to communicate lovingly, to connect with someone outside of yourself, to experience another person, and to allow that person to experience us. Both are part of love. It is the tool, our soul's tool, by which we learn to experience the highest reality, God. This is in the spiritual realm. In other words, there's always the man-to-man realm and there's the man-to-God realm. In a single word, love is transcendence. You know, when a person does not have the ability to love, which means the ability to connect outside of themselves, we've seen people like that have a very, very difficult time both giving and receiving, and it is not fun. It's not pretty. It's very, very difficult, and you know, it really locks you up. It really imprisons you. Now, so to give an example, I want to give 1 or 2 examples. Day 1. So within the first week, we have Chesed, and we have Gevorah of Chesed, discipline of Chesed. So I want to go through these 2 to give us an understanding of how each of the attributes, the emotional attributes, again, from the way Kabbalah views our personality, of how they each are part of the general Chesed, the ability to transcend ourselves and to communicate. So, day 1 is Chesed of Chesed. It's the Chesed detail, as we break Chesed down into 7 subcategories within Chesed, you know, the Gevorah, the Tiferes, the other 6 levels, or all 7s, including Chesed. This is how we do so. So here we go. Examine the love aspect of love. Chesed of Chesed, love from within love. The expression of love and its level of intensity. Everyone has the capacity to love in their hearts. The question is if and how we actualize and express it. So here we get a little more detailed over here. Ask yourself, this is the exercise of day 1, right? Ask yourself, what is my capacity to love another person? Do I have problems with giving? Am I stingy or selfish? Is it difficult for me to let someone else into my life? Do I have room for someone else? Do I allow room for someone else? Am I afraid of my vulnerability of opening up and getting hurt? These are all questions of examining the love aspect of my love. How do I express love? Am I able to communicate my true feelings? Some people cannot. All these questions are important questions. To some of you, the answer might be simple. To some of you, this might be your struggle. Do I withhold? I was dealing with somebody who was really going through a difficult time, and they really had a hard time communicating their feelings. So that does exist, you know, of course. Do I withhold expressing love out of fear of reaction? I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is sort of accurate in terms of from a psychological, pure medical evaluation or opinion. So I don't know if this is correct, but I read somewhere that someone mentioned that autistic children, actually, the reason why many of them are very closed up and do not express their emotions or have a difficult time doing so is because they are they are so pure and so raw and powerful that at the beginning of sort of their development, the pain and hurt of not receiving return for their pure emotions or pure expression to connect causes them to shut down or to really be much more reserved in their emotions. It's just a subconscious reaction to the more powerful emotions and deeper emotions that they have. I don't know if this is correct, sort of psychologically, medically, but it's nevertheless an interesting sort of perspective. Okay, on the contrary. So we ask, do I withhold expressing love out of fear of reaction? Or on the contrary, I often express too much too early. Do others misunderstand my intentions? I had a young fellow who explained to me that they sort of broke up their dating process because they felt that the other person was not responding properly to their reaching out, and they felt the person did not understand them and understand the love that they were trying to communicate. So these are all questions in examining the love aspect of our love. Now it continues, just another sentence and two. Whom do I love? Do I only love those that I relate to and who relate to me? In other words, how broad, how far is my love? How sort of infinite, how unlimited is my love? Do I have the capacity to love a stranger? Loving only those who are close to you is a limited scope, a limited reach of your love. To lend to lend a hand to someone I don't know. I've mentioned before, often when one of my first questions I ask anybody who wants to date my children is, when I call friends or acquaintances, I ask, does this individual, are they kind to people they don't know, to those who are not their friends or their immediate social circle? Being kind to your social circle is not fully a sign of your true kindness. That's almost a necessity to be accepted, to be liked, to be reciprocated, and so on and so forth. True love, true chesed, is when you can be kind to someone who's a total stranger. That means that it's a real kindness. It's not a selfish kindness. Do I express love only when it's comfortable? Why do I have problems with love, and what can I do about it? Does my love include the other 6 aspects of chesed, without which love will be distorted and unable to be truly realized? So that is the chesed of chesed. But I said I would give 2 examples. The reason why I say so is because I want to show how it's not only within chesed, but how it's comprised of the other attributes. So let's go to the Gevorah. Let's go to Gevorah, which is the second of the 7 emotional attributes, and see how that is part of the general chesed, and how to make our chesed, our loving kindness, better, more perfect, and so on. So let's continue over here, okay? Healthy love must include an element of discipline. That's where the Gevorah, discipline of chesed. Again, here we're focused on chesed and how to make our chesed better and bring out the best chesed that we have. You must introduce Gevorah. As he says, healthy love must always include an element of discipline, a degree of distance and respect for the other, an assessment of the person's capacity to contain your love. Love must be tempered and directed properly. Ask a parent who in the name of love has spoiled his child, or someone who suffocates their spouse with love and doesn't allow her any space of her own. Love with discretion is necessary to avoid giving to those that don't deserve it. So, this is a really important point, especially in today's day and age of plenty, where, thank God, we are blessed. For the most part, most of us don't live in extreme poverty. It does exist. And of course, we are obligated to help and assist and so on. But most of us in this country, based on various factors, community, government programming, etc., abundance that this country has, do not live in extreme poverty. We've grown up in a time where our parents, especially our grandparents, have had a much more difficult time. And as a result, our children, many have grown up in a very spoiled environment. And therefore, you must have the Gevorah element of your chesed. The Gevorah element of your chesed, which says there has to be a discipline. Am I spoiling my child in the name of love? Am I suffocating my spouse? You know, there's a famous reason given for why we use a ring. Why we use a ring for a wedding. You know, by Jewish law, you could use anything of value, but it's become the tradition, beginning from Jewish law and then becoming sort of universal, that we use a ring. And one of the reasons we use a ring is because a ring represents the circle of love and protection that you provide for each other. But in addition to that, it also represents the empty space that you allow for each other. That one in the marriage is not taking up all the space. There is room and space left for the other. In your love for someone else, you could totally smother them and not allow them space, not necessarily because you want to be controlling. That can also exist, and that's a different problem. But also sometimes in the name of love, you do not give, and you, for a genuine expression of love, you're not giving them the space they need. And therefore, you have to have the element of Gevorah. So here are the questions that we ask, and then we will move on to the story that I wanted to share with you. Is my love disciplined enough? Do others take advantage of my giving nature? Am I hurting anyone by becoming their crutch in the name of love? Am I hurting my children by forcing upon them my value system because I love them so? Now, that's a touchy question. Sometimes you need to educate your children. But the question is, are you hurting them? There is a way to do so by benefiting them rather than hurting them. Sometimes that could take on the form of actually hurting them. Very important question. Do I respect the one I love, or is it a selfish love? Am I sensitive to his feelings and attitudes? Do I see my beloved as an extension of myself and my needs? So this is also Gevorah discipline, meaning you have to limit yourself. Is my love just an extension of myself? I want my betterment, or am I truly loving the other person, and therefore I have to limit where I end and the other person begins? In my love, is there much emphasis on the one I love and his ability to contain my love as there is on me and my giving? Rain is a blessing only because it falls in drops and does not flood the fields. Help someone on their terms, not on yours. Apply yourself to this. This is the exercise of the day, and then we will conclude with this. Exercise for the day: help someone on their terms, not on yours. Apply yourself to their specific needs, even if it takes effort. That is the discipline, introducing the disciplined element within love. These are all about, on the one hand, the love, as we said in the Chesed Shebechesed, has to be as broad as can be. Love a stranger, love someone who hasn't done anything for you. On the other hand, there has to also be a healthy element of discipline within love, not to smother, to make sure it's not about you, etc., etc. And these are all parts of how you can change and become better. Talking about change and better, I want to mention this story to bring sort of the point home. A very beautiful story, and we will of course be inspired, each one of us, to take one step at a time as we go through the days of the Omer. So Mrs. Weiss. This story probably takes place, if I had to guess, 60 years ago. Maybe even more. Probably in the maybe late 50s, mid to late 50s. So Mrs. Weiss, as was customary, before the wedding, went with her chatan. At that time she was a kala, she was a bride. And she went with her husband-to-be, with her chatan, chosn, with her groom. She went into a private audience with the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, to receive his final blessings for their wedding. As was the tradition, by Hasidim, by followers and many disciples and admirers of the Rebbe. So she went with her chatan to receive their final blessings. And towards the end, she sort of bursts out crying. And to the surprise of her groom, chatan, she asks her groom whether she could have a few private moments to discuss something with the Rebbe. The groom was somewhat taken aback. She bursts out crying. This is not planned. And of course, he gives her that respect, talking about giving space. He gives her that space. And he walks out of the room. And she continues to have her private audience with the Rebbe for about 10 to 15 minutes. And she comes out. He doesn't want to ask her right there and then what was this all about. You know, they're getting ready for their wedding, and this was an obvious emotional something that was, a lot of turmoil within her for that to occur. It wasn't usual, it wasn't common. There was a very sort of respectful, formal behavior when you went into the Rebbe's audience. And the week of the wedding began the next day, which, as tradition is in many circles, in many Jewish circles, the tradition is that for 1 week before the wedding, for various halachic reasons, we do not communicate or talk or see our spouse until the chuppah. So for a week, they did not see each other, they did not talk to each other. Then the chuppah took place, and right after the chuppah, we know that what is called, you go into the yichud room. The chatan and the kala, the bride and groom, were the newlyweds, husband and wife, after the chuppah, enter into a private room where it's just the two of them. So, of course, they come into the yichud room, and the first question her husband asks her, he says, "You gotta tell me now. I'm totally. I'm full of surprise. I would love to know what happened in that discussion between you and the Rebbe." So she said to him, she responded, she said, I actually told the Rebbe that I do not want to move forward with this wedding. I want to break it up. I do not want to marry you. It's not exactly the first thing you want to hear right after the chuppah. But then she continues, she says, it's not what you think it is. She said, I told the Rebbe that I do not want to get married to you because you're too good for me. You're a scholar, you have such good character, and I don't. And specifically, I said to the Rebbe, I know that I am very short-tempered. So how will I be able to raise children? And how will I be able to be a good wife to such a fine individual when I have this short-tempered issue? So that was the discussion I had with the Rebbe. I said, I don't want to go through the wedding because my husband deserves somebody better than me. Imagine that. So what did the Rebbe tell you? He says, the Rebbe told me the following. The Rebbe said to me, and this is very much in line of what we're learning today. The Rebbe said every single person has a seed within themselves for all good characters. We have a godly soul, and the godly soul is comprised, as we just said, of these 7 emotions, and we all have the seeds for good and holy and positive character. It is up to us to develop it, to nourish it so that it sprouts and becomes to bring it into sort of action, to allow it to become part of our active sort of personality. So you could do it. You have it within yourself. This is what I suggest, the Rebbe says to her. One day you're going to have many children, the Rebbe said to her. And you're going to have no choice. You're going to have patience. So this is what I recommend. You should dedicate yourself to help children, both in hospitals and in kindergartens and so on. Help with children, and this will help you develop that needed patience. The mitzvah of it, and you're volunteering for something so good and kind and with children that demands patience, will allow that goodness, that attribute of patience, of love that you need for another person, it will allow it to grow and sprout and so on. This is what the Rebbe told me. Okay, so the Rebbe says something, you take that very seriously, and here I am. I listened, and we're married, Baruch Hashem. Some time passed, and they did not have children. They did not have children. They went to a doctor, and the doctor told her that you cannot have children. This is in her interview. This is a personal interview that she's sharing this. The doctor told her you cannot have children. And she said to herself, and I guess to her husband, that the Rebbe clearly told me one day I'm going to have many children. I know I'm going to have I know I'm going to have children, and I know what I need to do in order to merit that blessing. I got to work on developing my patience. So she dedicated herself even more to helping children in, again, hospitals and in kindergartens and similar. And she merited to not only have children. The Weiss family is a known family in the Chabad world. She merited to have 15 children, which incidentally, I'm just saying this, the number 15 is God's name. Yud and Hey is one of God's names. She merited to have 15 children. Because by bringing birth, so to say, within herself, and somehow that elicited from Hashem, from God Almighty, to have 15 children, despite what the doctor said. So this story should inspire us that even those flaws, we're just coming out of the Exodus, which spiritually and ethically represents the fact that we could break out of any limitations. There are many times we have certain character flaws that we just have come to terms with, and we're accepting of it, but we shouldn't be. We should work one step at a time in improving and breaking out of those addictions and flaws, as this story tells us. And as mentioned in the beginning of the class, the fact that we have a mitzvah to do this with the counting of the Omer tells us that we actually have the ability to do so if we put our effort and mind to it. As the Talmud says, that it's just on our own we can't do it. When we put the effort, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ozra, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Almighty, helps us. May we all be successful in first changing our approach and attitude to being able to change and improve our own character flaws. May we do so one step at a time, and certainly we will be successful. Everybody have a great week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing these words of Torah.